Pompeo were sued Monday for spying on U.S. lawyers and journalists who met with Julian Assange while he was living in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he had political asylum. The lawsuit is being filed as Britain prepares to extradite the WikiLeaks founder to the United States, where he faces up to 175 years in prison for violating the Espionage Act by publishing classified documents exposing U.S. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. Assange spent nearly 7 years inside the embassy from 2012 till April 2019, when Metropolitan Police entered the embassy, arrested him after Ecuador revoked his political asylum. The lawsuit filed Monday accuses the Spanish security firm UC Global of spying on Assange and his visitors inside the embassy on behalf of the CIA. UC Global and the company's director, David Morales, are also named as defendants in the new lawsuit, which comes less than a year after Yahoo News revealed the CIA considered abducting and possibly assassinating Assange while he was in the embassy. On Monday, several plaintiffs in the lawsuit spoke during an online news conference. This is Deborah Herbeck. She's a media lawyer who visited Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy in London several times to discuss sensitive legal matters.
On arrival, there was a strict protocol for the protection of Julian, we were told. Passports, mobile phones, cameras, laptops, recording devices, and other electronic equipment were turned over to the security guards in the lobby. We learned much later, through a criminal investigation under the supervision of a court in Spain, that while visitors like me were meeting with Julian in the embassy conference room, the guards next door were taking apart our phones, removing and photographing SIM cards, and we believe downloading data from our electronic equipment. Their boss, David Morales from UC Global, who appears to have been recruited by the CIA through associates of Sheldon Adelson during a visit to a tech conference, was making regular trips to Washington, D.C., to New York, to Las Vegas, reportedly to hand over thumb drives and to receive further instructions from his U.S. government handlers. In other words, during our meetings with Julian at the embassy, recordings of our confidential conversations and the contents of our electronic devices were being delivered into the hands of the United States government. I'm a New York lawyer. I have the right to assume that the US government is not listening to my private and privileged conversations with my clients, and that information about other clients and cases I may have on my phone or laptop are secure from illegal government intrusion. This is not just a violation of our constitutional rights. This is an outrage.
That's, again, the attorney, Deborah Herbeck, who is a plaintiff in the new lawsuit against the CIA and the former CIA director, Mike Pompeo, for spying on her and other visitors when they met with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. We're joined now by Richard Roth, the lead attorney who filed the lawsuit on Monday. Lay out the case, Richard.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for having me. So the case is very simple and very troubling. Essentially, there are these individuals who work at the embassy who are just there to essentially monitor the traffic that comes in. What we learned was that through a Spanish court proceeding, we learned that, in fact, UC Global went to a convention and presented at a convention where Sheldon Adelson, as Deborah Herbeck said, essentially introduced them to, brought them in to the wings of the CIA to not only just monitor who comes to visit Julian Assange at the Ecuadorian embassy, but to actually take their phones, their cell phone, their laptops, any kind of recording devices, and to image them while they were inside, because when they walked in, they had to leave them with the security company. We also learned that they were streaming, that they actually had streaming microphones and cameras inside the embassy for meetings with Julian Assange. We learned this in the Spanish court proceeding, and there are witnesses who essentially were employees at UC Global thinking that they were just doing their job and learning from Morales that all of this was going back to, quote, American intelligence. It was going back to the Americans. It was going back to the dark side. And these individuals came forward and told essentially the Spanish court and others that they did not understand at the time that they were part of this enterprise that tape recorded everything that Julian Assange did. And what's very troubling about it is not only is it a violation of the Fourth Amendment, your right to privacy, but you have lawyers, you have journalists, you have doctors who went to visit Julian Assange. And if doctors went in, there's a doctor-patient privilege, there's an attorney-client privilege. And so not only did they literally listen in on the conversations, but any client of, for example, Deborah Urbex, who had information on her laptop, not even Assange's, was the U.S. government now has privy to. So it's very troubling. Deborah's comment that it's an outrage is square on point. And so what we've done is we've commenced an action to essentially let the world know and to seek damages for these plaintiffs who are journalists, who are lawyers, who essentially went to the embassy, unbeknownst to them, had everything of theirs recorded and imaged, and clearly a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So we've sued Morales, UC Global, we've sued the CIA, and we've sued Mike Pompeo for the outrageous conduct. On top of that, Mike Pompeo, in his very first address when he became CIA director, let it be known he was going to go after Julian Assange. He called Julian Assange and WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence agency, and he called Julian a fraud. And there's plenty of evidence, more of which we will get through discovery, that essentially would lead one to conclude that the CIA went in, took UC Global, and put it under its wing to allow it to record and listen to everything that Julian Assange was saying.
Richard, I want to go to that clip of then CIA Director Mike Pompeo in 2017 talking about WikiLeaks in his first address as CIA Director in the Trump administration.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service. It has encouraged its followers to find jobs at the CIA in order to obtain intelligence. It directed Chelsea Manning in her theft of specific secret information. It overwhelmingly focuses on the United States while seeking support from anti-democratic countries and organizations. It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia.
Julian Assange later responded to Pompeo's allegation in an interview with journalist Jeremy Scahill on the podcast Intercepted.
Pompeo has stated that WikiLeaks instructed Chelsea Manning to go after certain information. That's an interesting revelation. And then there is his statement that this, i.e. WikiLeaks and its publications, end now. So how does he propose to conduct this ending? He didn't say, but the CIA is only in the business of collecting information, kidnapping people and assassinating people. So it's quite a menacing statement that he does need to clarify.
And again, Richard Roth, Yahoo News last year revealed that the CIA did consider abducting and possibly assassinating Julian Assange while he was in political asylum in the embassy. Your comments on this, and of course Pompeo could be a presidential candidate in the next presidential election.
Yeah, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks is a publication. It gets information from sources and publishes it. No different than the New York Times, no different than any newscaster. It does nothing more. There is an indictment alleging more. Certainly the government will have to prove it. But the bottom line is, thus far, all we've seen is publication. It's no different than the Pentagon Papers the New York Times actually published. So there is a very clear purpose for the news, and that is if information comes in its possession, and it doesn't matter which news source, whether it's Fox or whether it's CNN, then it has not only is it right, but it has an obligation to tell the world that this is what I have. There's no evidence, and we'll certainly see if he's extradited at this trial, that actually that WikiLeaks was actually involved in the hacking of any computers by the NSA. Chelsea Manning is a different story, but if Chelsea Manning gives information to the New York Times, you can bet your bottom dollar the New York Times is going to publish that, because that is its obligation, and that's all WikiLeaks is. Why Mike Pompeo went ahead and went so far, so extreme, to essentially label WikiLeaks as a hostile, non-state intelligence service is just remarkable. And then what he did was they went ahead and, using a UC Global, they actually went in, and they are the ones that wrongfully took information. There's a real irony here. While WikiLeaks is being charged of wrongfully taking information, it's the CIA that wrongfully took information, not only of Assange, but of U.S. citizens. Ms. Urbeck, Margaret Kunstler, and other plaintiffs. So there's a real irony here that what they're being accused of is what the CIA was doing, which is very, very troubling.
And, of course, many journalists. I wanted to go back to 2014. In a Democracy Now! Exclusive, we went inside Ecuador's embassy in London to interview WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange as he had just entered his third year of political asylum. We're in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where Julian Assange took refuge 2 years ago. He's been detained in Britain for close now to 4 years. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Julian.
Thank you, Amy.
How are you doing here? It's been over 2 years that you have really not seen daylight for any extended period of time.
It's been nearly 4 years that I've been detained without charge in one form or another here in the United Kingdom, first in prison to solitary confinement, then under house arrest for about 18 months, and now 2 years here in the embassy. The Ecuadorian government gave me political asylum in relation to the ongoing national security investigation by the DOJ, the Department of Justice in the United States, into our publications and also into sourcing efforts. So did I enter into a conspiracy with Chelsea Manning, who was sentenced last year to 35 years in prison. So the question as to how I'm doing, of course, personally, it's a difficult situation in a variety of ways. I would say that when someone's in this position, what you are most concerned about is the interruption in your family relationships. So because of the security situation, that's made it very hard for my children and my parents.
So that's Julian Assange when we interviewed him. And people can go to democracynow.org to see all the interviews we did with Julian Assange in London. But the significance of now him being held for, that was 2014, he'd been held for 4 years, so we're talking 12 years now in the maximum security Belmarsh prison, where Britain is preparing to extradite him to face espionage charges in the United States. What role do you see your lawsuit playing in the possibility of stopping this extradition?
So it's a great question, and let's just talk for a second about the fact that he's in a maximum security prison for a publisher. It's that in and of itself is an outrage. But the role is the following: if in fact we can prove that the CIA was listening to and taking information, that includes Julian Assange's lawyers, criminal lawyers, in the actual extradition proceeding and in the proceeding which presumably will be tried in the Northern District of Virginia, when in fact if in fact he is extradited and if in fact he is tried. So think about it. The CIA, years before he's even tried in Virginia, has tape recordings of the conversations Julian Assange had with his lawyers. We think that that information is so outrageous that if, in fact, we prove our case, when we go to the Virginia court, there could be a federal court judge in Virginia that looks at the CIA's conduct and says, I can't. There's not a chance I will let you try this case in light of the fact that you're the ones that spied on him. You have all his information. And the goal with that lawsuit, independent of this one, is to have that lawsuit thrown out, to let the publisher publish. That's all we're asking, is let the publisher publish. I'm not the lawyer in that case. I know the lawyer in that case. He's a highly qualified Washington, D.C. criminal lawyer. But that's what that's the goal there. The goal there is to just let the publisher publish. That's all it is. And the irony is, yesterday, Rand Paul said that the Espionage Act, for which Julian has been essentially indicted, should be repealed. So on the one hand, you have a major Republican senator saying